Welcome to the selfgrowth.com show. My name is David Riklan, and I'm the founder of selfgrowth.com. Today, we'll be discussing how to get organized and go from overwhelmed to optimized. To help us understand this topic, I'm excited to interview Barbara Hemphill and Andrea Anderson. Make sure to listen closely. We're going to be sharing a lot of information today. Before we get started, I just want to take a couple of minutes and share some information about Barbara and Andrea. Frequently referred to as the paper tiger lady, Barbara Hemphill started her company in 1978 with a $7 ad in a New York City newspaper. She has appeared on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and Reader's Digest, USA Today, Kiplinger's Personal Finance, New York Times, Real Simple, and Guidepost Magazine. She's the past president of the National Association of Professional Organizers, a winner of the Founders Award, and a two-time winner of the President's Award. As Barbara's business grew, so did her vision. She wanted to be able to offer others the same opportunity that she had while expanding the number of people she could help. So in the 1990s, she created a certification program for organizing and productivity experts. In 2007, Barbara partnered with Andrea Anderson, one of her certified consultants at the time, to train and mentor certified productive environmental specialists. Love that term, around the world. Since then, Andrea has helped Barbara turn her consultant training class into an online program and virtual team of experts. She's the author of the 10-Day Guide to Launching a Highly Successful Productivity Consulting Business in 90 Days, and is the creator of the popular Productive Environment Network. They've done a lot of stuff together. Spanning a 40-year career on the cutting edge of a growing industry, Barbara Hemphill remains passionate about helping people eliminate the physical, digital, emotional, and spiritual clutter that prevents all of us from accomplishing our work and enjoying their lives. Barbara and Andrea, welcome to our show.
Thank you, David. We're glad to be here.
All right, we have a lot of information I want to share today and a lot of stuff. But before we do, I'm going to suggest everybody jot down a website, and I'll tell you why. The website is tameyourpapertiger.com. It's www.tameyourpapertiger.com. And they're going to be inviting you later for a free webinar where you're going to have an opportunity to really go even more deeply into getting organized and dealing with some of these challenges that we're talking about. So I want to jump right in. So we're talking about being organized. When you talk about being organized, what does organized mean to you? Does it mean being a neat freak? What exactly is that concept of being organized?
Well, my answer to your question, does it mean being a neat freak? It's absolutely not. And people often think that because I have been in this organizing industry for 40 years, that I'm naturally a neat person.
Right.
Andrea would tell you that that is definitely not the case. I am not naturally. I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I am a musician by training. I love to start things. I don't like to finish them as well. I love the big picture. I have trouble with details. And if it were not for the systems that we've created, I would struggle like everybody else. Organization really can be described as systems that enable you to accomplish your work and enjoy your life. And there's a couple of myths that particularly address the question you asked, David. Things that we've heard that really make people reluctant to even try what we offer because they think it wouldn't work. One of those is a place for everything and everything in its place. I mean, people have heard that. That is a complete myth. It's half right. There must be a place for everything, but everything is not always going to be in its place. And so our goal is to help people figure out how, when they're ready to put it away, they can quickly do it. And the second one that we hear so often is handle a piece of paper only once.
Right.
No way. That does not work. And people who've tried to do that. So there's lots of myths, and we want to dispel those myths today.
All right. It's interesting. You started with the concept of organizing being kind of a system. It's about having a system for organization that enables you to enjoy your life. I love that. The reason being, I fully comprehend the stress of feeling out of control. because it's very, very stressful. You're not organized, you feel out of control. So I get that. And I get the value of having a system, because you really, in order to get to that place where you feel comfortable and you can kind of let things go, you need a system in place. All right, now I want to move ahead about talking about getting organized. I know for a lot of people, it's this constant struggle, especially professionals, anybody in a business or working for someone. Why is it such a constant struggle for most people?
Well, first of all, it's not something that's taught, unfortunately. I mean, I wish our school systems taught it, because we could teach it to children. I remember I'm the mother of 5 and grandmother of 4. And when my children were little, one of the first things I taught them was how to get organized in a way that was kind of fun. Like, for example, they had containers that were different colored. So all the vehicles go in the yellow colored container. And I color coded my children. One daughter was red, one was yellow, one was green. And so when something was missing off of it, it's like, oh, that's the umbrella that belongs to Tommy because it's the green one is missing. And it worked really well. So we're not taught that. But our business has been based on 4 words, which is how I started this business. Clutter is postponed decisions. I learned that from clothes closets. Clothes closets are full because we haven't decided whether we're really serious about losing the 10 pounds you need to lose to get back into that favorite pair of pants. Mm-hmm. Or the exercise equipment. Oh, it looks so great on Home Shopping Network. I know that would work for me. And you buy it and it's been in there for 6 months. You've never even pulled it out. Or the one that now in our society is absolutely rampant are the gifts we've gotten from other people. Right. The candlesticks we got from Aunt Sally. We love Aunt Sally. She's just one of our favorite people, but those candlesticks are not really my style. But if she came for Thanksgiving dinner and I put them on the dining room table, she'd be so happy. So we are bombarded and we don't know how to make those decisions. So that's the first thing. What prevents us from making the decisions is emotion. In my book, my most recent book is called Less Clutter, More Life. My favorite page in it is a page that says what stops us. And it lists all the things that stops us from getting organized. So here's just a few. I never have enough time. I have too much to do. I have better things to do. Organizing is boring. It's too difficult. It never lasts. It's never good enough. I didn't even create it. I have no idea what's there. I'm easily distracted and go off on tangents. I get stuck in the memories of the past. It's too emotionally draining. And then here's the one. I want to be responsible and respectful of things I've been given. And then it's hard to admit I have an issue. I'm afraid to let something go. I might want it back. So those are all things, and they're all related to emotion, mostly fear that we'll make a mistake, fear that we'll offend someone, fear that we'll forget, fear that we'll want it back. And so we're helping people. We don't tell them how to decide. That's not our right. It's to teach them how to decide.
Right. It's interesting. It's one of the things, you just gave me a whole list of excuses I could have, I could use in the future. So I use a few of those already, but you gave me some new ones that I could think about. But I love this concept that you talked about, that clutter is kind of postponed decisions.
Okay, I got to stop you right there. You did something that Andrea pointed out to me that I hadn't thought about for years. You quoted me almost. You said almost. Clutter is kind of postponed decisions. And if you go on and Google clutter is postponed decisions, you will see that I've been quoted hundreds of times, and people usually put in a disqualifier. Clutter is simply postponed decisions, or merely postponed decisions, or only postponed decisions. So if you have trouble making decisions, which we all do, that's why I do too. I mean, that's why it's hard to do it. And then somebody says, oh, it's just postponed decisions. Then it's like, oh, well, I should be able to do it. So one of the reasons that people are reluctant to hire a professional to help them is they think this is not a big deal. I shouldn't have to pay for somebody to help me do this because after all, it's just postponed decisions.
Interesting. The funny thing is, I wrote down clutter is postponed decisions, and I added the film as I was
And it
talking.
happens all the time.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's just your mind fills in stuff all the time. It's a natural. I think we do that just naturally.
It's
Uh,
another form of clutter, David.
yeah, in our minds for sure. So you talked about some of the struggles people are having. So what are the biggest obstacles? So this is some of them that really keeping people from gaining control over their stuff. You talked about some of them. So how would you prioritize? What are the biggest obstacles that keep people?
Well, the biggest one is actually the core of everything we do, which is, okay, first of all, you have to make the decision. So once we get over the emotion, we can make, and actually, I want to tell a story here because this is probably, through the 40 years I've been talking about it, this is one story that's probably impacted people more than any other. I was autographing books at Barnes and Noble, and I had talked about emotion stopping us from making decisions. And when I was done, a young man walked up to me and he said, my apartment is full of papers. And he said, every night I come home from work and I say, okay, tonight's the night I'm going to clean this up. And he said, I start sorting, usually on my bed because that's the biggest flat space.
Okay.
And he said, I literally become paralyzed. And then he looked at me and literally a tear kind of come down his eyes. And he said, my mother died when I was 6. Are you telling me that I have to deal with the emotion of losing my mother before I can handle the paper? I was kind of taken aback by the question. And I thought about it. I said, well, I really can't answer that because I'm not a mental health professional. But I can tell you what I have seen is that if you find someone you trust to help you make decisions about what you really need and want to keep, and it probably won't be a family member. Mm-hmm. If you find somebody that helps you decide what you really need and want to keep, it will solve your paper problem, mm-hmm. and quite likely impact your emotions in general. I told that story. I was giving a speech at a big convention, and a woman walked up to me. She said, you just saved my marriage. I said, wow, that's pretty dramatic. What do you mean? She said, I came to this event with the intention of going home and telling my husband, to whom I've been married for 13 years, that I was leaving because he's a pack rat and everything is filled up and I have allergies and I can't keep the place clean and he won't get rid of anything. And then she stopped and she said, until I heard you, I never understood that it wasn't that he wouldn't get rid of things, but that he couldn't. His mother died when he was 7. Yeah. So I said, and she said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm willing to go back and try it again now that I realize that. And I said, may I make a suggestion? She said, of course. And I said, go back and say something to the effect of, I never understood before how important all this is to you. Let's figure out how we can keep it and still live together. I stayed in touch with them for 8 or 9 months afterwards. Mm-hmm. And the progress was amazing because what happens, and this happens in families, it also happens in companies where there's an employee that wants to get rid of something and the boss wants to keep it or vice versa. And so in every case, we have to give other people permission and we have to work on our own stuff. In fact, one of the things we do for companies is something called a productivity party. And prior to the event, we talk about that everything we're going to talk about is going to apply to home as well. But we make them take a pledge that they're going to listen for what they're going to do, not what they're going to tell somebody else to do.
I like it. I like the concept. I just want to remind people, and I'm going to ask you to give out the website one more time. You're going to be going deeper into a lot of these concepts in a free webinar that you're offering. And you want to give out the website one more time?
Andrea, sure. I'll let you share that.
Yeah, sure. It's tameyourpapertiger.com. Right. Go to tameyourpapertiger.com and you can go ahead and register for that. And we go into much detail on paper organization, email organization, and setting up systems. One thing that we really talk about in the webinar, I'll mention this, is that this is not a webinar where you're going to get tips and tricks and hacks. Those are a dime a dozen anywhere out there on the internet. This is about systems. So if you want to learn about systems that save you space, time, energy, and money, then definitely you want to sign up for that webinar.
I like it.
Andrea mentioned something really important. She said, talked about systems, and we do, as she said, use the acronym for a system of saving you space, time, energy, and money. Every time there's something you do repeatedly, and anytime you're trying to create a habit, you have to have a system to do that. I love James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, says you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And people often ask us the question, what should I do? And we always answer, that's the wrong question. Organizing in and of itself has no value. And there are people, some of the listeners may know people that are always organizing things, but they never have anything to show for it. Organizing is simply systems to help you accomplish your work and enjoy your life. So the question is not what should I do? The question is, what will you do?
Great.
So when someone calls us and says, okay, we need help getting organized, the very first question we use is always, we have a 5-step system we use. And the first step in that system is state your vision. Your vision is your why. It's like, get organized for what? And when your why is deep enough and you feel it enough so that you can taste it and smell it and whatever, then there is nothing that can stop you. And in all the years that I've been doing this, no one has ever come back to me and said that they were sorry that they invested the time and the money that they did in it. Some people are not willing. I mean, it's not easy. If it were, we wouldn't be doing this webinar. Everybody would do it if it were easy. And our clients are some of the most intelligent, most creative, most caring people in the world. And they still struggle, because that addresses what you said at the beginning, David. Why is it? Because if you weren't born that way, I was blessed. I wasn't born that way, but I was blessed. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. My father we were very poor. We lived in the second floor of a tenant farmhouse. It didn't have running water when I was really a child. But my father taught me things like, one of the things he used to say is, half of any job is having the right tool. And a lot of what we do is help people use the right tool, not just have it. Sometimes people have it, but they don't use it. And my mother was the administrative assistant to the president of a bank for 46 years. And I can remember I was about 12 years old, and she showed me a system that they used in the bank to make sure that all the reports for auditors were submitted on time. And back in those days, there was no automation. That was done manually. And the system that she showed me, we help our clients implement today because it still works.
There's a couple of things I want to note. One, back to what you're talking about systems. I've seen situations where someone's horribly disorganized. Someone comes in and just takes care of it, organizes, and then they leave. 6 months later, because the people don't have the systems, the disorganization's back. It's like if you know, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen this also. If you don't have the systems in place, you're just going to fall back into whatever habits that caused it to begin with.
That's exactly right. And not only that, but the people feel worse. We had a client who I actually knew her in a social setting, known her for 2 or 3 years. And she always kind of joked about her disorganization. You know, how a lot of people do that. You know, a lot of people joke about how disorganized they are.
Sure.
And she was one of those. And she was getting a new job. And so I went to her and I said, you know what? I'd like to offer you 2 free hours of consulting just to help you get started in this job, because you've been so good to me and whatever. Well, she didn't accept it. Well, as a business owner, when you can't get somebody to accept free services, like, what's this about? So I talked to her about it, and it turns out that she said, I have hired 3 organizers in 2 states over the past 10 years and paid almost $10,000, and I'm worse off. So I said, well, I'm not charging you, so you have nothing to lose but 2 hours. So we worked together for 2 hours, and she was excited, just thrilled. And I said, so can you tell me what the difference is? She said 2 things. She said, number one, I never understood before that my overflowing email and my piles of paper were postponed decisions. So I just never understood that. But she said, secondly, everybody else told me what I should do. You never once told me what I should do. You kept asking me, what will you do? And if your why is big enough, we can always figure out a way so that you can do it.
I'm a strong proponent of understanding your why, your motivation, because if you don't understand the benefit for you, you're going to lose focus. You're going to lose track. And there's always a shiny new object to pull our attention. But if we can always go back to that why, that brings a lot of value. Mm-hmm. So I want to jump into something else, because a lot of people inherently see some value. There's some value in being organized. I think people get that inherently. But there's a ton of costs of not being organized. What are some of the costs? What's the downside of not being organized? What do you see?
Well, the first one is just lack of peace of mind, just constantly being overwhelmed, afraid that something's slipping through the cracks. I think that's one of the things now, because we live in a world where there is so much going on and we have so many opportunities and so many demands. And so it's like, you wake up in the middle of the night, oh, did I send this email? Or, did I pay this bill? Or did I respond to this person? So it's really the cost of overwhelm. And research shows, my doctor told me, I remember several years ago, that 90% of the office calls that she had were related to diseases that were caused by stress. And so it really is an issue of physical, emotional and physical health. Then there's also the cost. Andrea, I remember you're telling the story about finding a check, finding a check that was never cashed.
Yeah, multiple checks. The very first, I actually joined Barbara's program back in 2005 to become one of her certified consultants. And my very first client, my very first paid client, she recouped her investment in things that we found in her office. We found checks that had been written to her for products that she sold that she never cashed. She had lost them. Crazy. And in addition to the checks, we found $650 worth of gift cards to her favorite stores. And she explained to me, because I was like, wow, $650. I was really zeroed in on the money aspect, that she had lost this money. But she told me, she said, no, Andrea, you don't understand. It's so much more than that. She said, some of these gift cards were from my mother and some were from my mother-in-law. And she said, every time I see them, I feel guilty and I'm so scared they're going to ask me what I bought with their gift cards. So, I mean, that was real money. And that's just one example. I mean, we find money and time. The other piece too is the statistic that the average worker wastes 150 hours per year just looking for lost information. And if you do the math on the 150 hours, that is literally just 30 minutes a day. So if you find yourself wasting more than 30 minutes a day, then you're wasting more than 150 hours per year looking for stuff. So
we got a feedback from one of our clients one time who said she had hired us, and she said, my organization has grown 400% in the past year. And she said, one of my big issues was paperwork. And she said, once we put the paperwork, I never had that problem again. And she said, it was like having a new employee without having to pay benefits.
I like
it. And research shows that for every 5 employees a company hires, only 4 are doing what they're paid to do, because the 5th one is looking for something. They're looking for a form, they're looking for equipment, they're looking for an email, they're looking for an agenda in order to do what they're paid to do. So think about that. If all of your employees got organized so they could find it, and that comes from, we implement what we call the 7 information management questions that every company should address. Every single time an employee can't find something, it's because one of those 7 questions haven't been addressed. So if you address that, which by the way, you can do in a company, we can do that we can make a huge impact in about 90 days. And then the rest of it over the course of a year, because we love to work with a company for like a year, because that has you address tax time and convention time and a new, so you're putting systems in place for every single thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So that means with working with us, you are getting one employee that you don't have to pay anymore for. You're getting productivity from an existing employee. And so to put price on that is really priceless.
Yeah, it's a huge value. So one of the things I want to do is step you through a little bit of a scenario. So we have a lot of people who are listening now who are disorganized. They know they got stacks of stuff or big inbox or clutter in their office. In some cases, now it's a home office. A lot of people work from home. That might have built up for years. What steps should they take to begin to turn things around and become more organized? So step us through some of the things that they should do.
All right, well, let's go back to what we said at the very beginning. The core of this is clutter is postponed decisions. So the reason we've got a mess is because there's not decisions. So one of our other productive environment instant principles is today's mail is tomorrow's pile. And so what most people do when they have a mess, they just start throwing away things, clean out the email box, throw away the papers, whatever. In fact, remember a number of years ago, I had a client who said, he was a business owner, very successful movie production company. He said, for as long as I can remember, I have come into my office one Saturday a month to clean up all the clutter. And after we work with him, he said, I'll never have to do that again because I'm doing the systems along the way. So one of the things is today's mail is tomorrow's pile, meaning it's not enough to make a decision. You have to have a way to implement that decision. And if you're not, then all you're doing is cleaning up the mess. So that's really important thing. Another thing to remember is that research shows that 80% of what we keep, we never use. Now, we've known the 80-20 principle for a long time, but one of my very wise business coaches said, I think in our day and age, it's probably closer to 95-5. That if you look at what it is that really is important for you to accomplish your work and enjoy your life, that it's probably about 5% of it. Well, when you look at all the stuff we keep, so let me give you one simple technique. I mean, this probably is a hack, which we're not really famous for, but this is such a good one. If you're thinking of paper, people have big piles. They say, well, this is a big project. I have to work on all this. So we teach people to divide files into reference files and action file. A reference file is, okay, here's the 80% of the paper that we're done with. We're not willing to throw it away yet, but we're done with it. So we're going to put that in a reference file and put it off in a file cabinet somewhere. We're only going to keep on our desk the action papers, which is what really need to have. So that's an example of putting a system into place. So where do you start? Well, it really doesn't matter where you start. That's often when people come in. Where do we start? We just start somewhere, and we start by making decisions.
And one, if you'll allow me, I'll follow up with that. One of the very first things we teach is called the File Act Toss system, and that we go into detail on that in our webinar. But if you want to take action like immediately after this presentation ends, this live event ends, then you just grab that first pile of paper that's sitting closest to you right now on your desk or near you. Just look around, identify a stack that's been bugging you, and just pick up that stack. And this is what Barbara teaches too, and I catch myself all the time. One piece of paper at a time. Don't shuffle and pull through, but just pick out one thing and say, do I need to file this for future reference? That's file. Do I need to take action on it? That's the act. Or can I toss it? So those are the first three decisions. Every single person watching this can do that today. File, act, toss. Then you're going to end up with two piles. You're going to have a big file pile possibly, and a big act pile, something you need to do possibly. And hopefully you'll have more stuff in the toss pile, which is, your trash can recycle bin or your shredder. So those are the first three. And then watch our webinar to find out what to do after that.
All right.
And another question that you can ask that helps all the time. This is a question you should ask with everything, whether you're in your junk drawer in the kitchen or in your clothes in the closet or in your email. What's the worst possible thing would happen if I didn't have this? If I gave this away, shredded it, tossed it, deleted it, or whatever, and it turned out I was wrong, what would happen? And then you just say, is that a price I'm willing to pay? And it doesn't have a right or wrong answer. It's not a moral decision. It's what's the price I'm willing to pay? And if you say, yeah, I'm willing to pay this, you can throw it away. And if you say no, you can say no. And you just keep going through, and you can go through piles of email and paper with that very quickly.
I like that concept used as a scenario for almost all decision making. You know, is this particular decision I'm going to make, is this something I could live with? Worst case, if I go ahead with this, in your case, saying you're throwing something out, but I like that conceptually for most decisions. If I move ahead with this, will I be able to live with my worst case scenario?
Well, that, David, is really, you know, I don't like paper or email any better than anybody else does. But the reason I'm still in this business after 40 years and love it more than ever is that God did not create any two people the same. And so who and what I really care about are the people and the organizations. It's helping them to accomplish their work and enjoy their lives. And so that isn't Less Clutter, More Life, that book. The premise is that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter. I remember one time I was in college, I was newly married. My husband was going to college at night school. I was teaching school during the day, and he had to drive a couple of hours to go to school. And he used to want me to drive with him. And I always thought it was such a waste of time. You know, it's like I really needed to be home. But I remembered when I was in high school, I had an algebra teacher. I was terrified of algebra, Mr. Joy. I just adored him, but I was terrified of him. I was horrible in math. And we were going to go on a band trip to Oklahoma, and we had to do our homework, and I didn't get my homework done for algebra. And I went into Mr. Joy with great fear and trepidation about what he was going to say. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Joy, I didn't get my work done, but Miss Shook made us do our biology, and then I knew I couldn't go, and, you know, I had all this stuff. And he said, well, Barbara, he said, you know, I have to give you an F for the papers you didn't get done. But because of the others, you'll still get a B or C. I don't even remember. But what I remember is he said, 10 years from now, nobody is going to know or care what you got in algebra. And I think that applies to what we do. So when you look at a to-do list, we go into people's offices where they have yellow legal pads, piles of them, with to-dos that they've been going to do for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. And so one of the questions always is, what's most important to you? What legacy do you want to leave? I've said that I want on my tombstone, she gave others hope. I happen to be a Christian, so my ultimate hope is in that. But Andrea came up with the acronym of HOPE, help others pursue entrepreneurship. And I love entrepreneurship because I started my company because I needed money and I needed flexibility because I wanted to put my children first. And I decided the best way to do that was to listen to what problem there was in the world that I could solve that people paid me for. And that's what prompted me to write that first ad. I believe, David, there are so many people that want to be entrepreneurs and have ideas, and they have value that they can bring to the world. But in many cases, they're employed and they're like on a treadmill and they're just constantly working day after day. They don't have time to think about it. And so I encourage people to ask the question, what's the legacy I want to leave? What's really important to me? And here's two interesting things. When they know what they want to do, then deciding what email or what paper to keep is easy. Because if you know where you're going, then you can say, does this help me accomplish my work or enjoy my life? But sadly, many people have not slowed down enough to really figure that out, what that is. But here's the exciting part. When we work with people who don't know what they want, I think about my first marriage ended after 14 years. I was devastated. No one in my family had ever been divorced. I was embarrassed. I was frightened. I had 3 young children, and I was sitting in a counselor's office, and she said, Barbara, You have a blank slate. What do you want? And I looked at her and I said, I don't know. You know, I was Mrs. Tom and I expected to be Mrs. Tom for 5 decades. And she made a statement to me that changed my life and which is the core of what we do. She said, let's start with what you don't want. She didn't use the word clutter, but that's what she was saying.
Sure.
Let's start with the clutter. So we have seen time and time again with all of our consultants, when they go in to work with clients, if they know what they want, we can help them decide what's really clutter. If they don't know what they want, then if we start peeling the clutter off, it's like peeling the layers of an onion off. And the deeper you get, the more you get to the center and you get to the core of who you were really meant to be and why you're on this earth.
I like the concept. So there's a few more things I want to do before we wrap up. One is, Andrea, can you give out the website again for the webinar? Because there's a lot of information for folks who want to move ahead with getting more organized. Just tell us a little bit about it again and give out the website one more time.
Sure. The website is tameyourpapertiger.com. So you can go there right now and you can register for our webinar, tameyourpapertiger.com. And it's funny that what we just talked about, David, about making the decision of, you know, whether you can toss something or not. Can you live without, can you live with the consequences of not having it? There's actually a process we call the art of waste basketry. Barbara came up with that years ago, the art of waste basketry. So you will actually, everybody that registers for the webinar will get something we call our office transformation blueprint. And all of those questions about the art of waste basketry are on that blueprint. So make sure you get that as well.
All right.
So yeah.
There's one other area I want to cover because this is something we're all dealing with. I know when computers and the internet started coming along, we're supposed to be all this paperless business, but we get emails, we're printing them, and we're getting a flood of emails coming in and communications we're getting bombarded with literally on a daily basis. Do you have any tips for handling this flood of email and communications we're getting?
Absolutely. And I had a very interesting conversation just last week with a financial services provider. And we were talking about the fact that our banking institutions and people like that really push us to go paperless. Like even if we don't, we maybe even have to pay an extra fee or whatever. But what's particularly interesting is that although if you're a business owner, you can be audited for 7 years, which means you might have to go back. Go on your bank website and try to find something that was from 5 years ago. It won't be there.
No.
So in order to get it, it means you have to go to the bank, for which they will charge you. And then it gets further complicated if you change banks. So if you've changed banks and that information you want was from 1 or 2 banks ago, and you didn't keep track of your account numbers and all that, it's going to be very challenging. So what does that say? That says that in this day and age, what is really important is that you identify what we call the 7 information management questions. What information do you need to keep? In what form? For how long? Who's responsible for filing it? Who needs access to it? How do you find it? And how's it backed up? Now that sounds very complicated, but if you implement what I said earlier about today's mail is tomorrow's pile, it's not. And we can help you quickly put that in place so we stop the problem. So many people didn't manage paper all that well anyway. When I first started this, when I wrote Taming the Paper Tiger originally in '88, we were all paper. Well, then we started moving very quickly into paperless. And so then people said, oh, well, I don't have to worry about this because we're in paperless. The issue isn't paper or paperless. The issue is decision-making and systems. So it doesn't really matter whether you choose paper or whether you choose digital. The issue is you have to have systems so you can find what you need when you need it.
All right.
Yeah.
I like it. And conceptually, these things work really well. What I'd like to do a couple of things before we wrap up. I want to remind people a lot of good information that you both shared today, but make sure everybody signs up for this webinar because they're going to go deeper into certain areas. And it's a good first step. So as soon as we're done here today, go to tameyourpapertiger.com. make sure to check it out. They're going to go a lot more detail. And we've covered really a lot of material today. What I'd like to do is just get from you any final suggestions for people. So we covered a lot of approaches, a lot of things. Any final suggestions for people before we wrap up for today?
Well, one question that I encourage everybody to ask, it is, what is one thing I want to happen in my life? And then you pick your time frame. So different people have different ways that they operate. Some people might answer that question today, or some people might say this week, or some people might say this month, or some people might say this year. That doesn't really matter. But the issue is, if you haven't identified that one thing, then you're going to live your life in a very reactive way. Now, having said that, I heard a story. I was at a wonderful conference this week, and this nonprofit owner told the story about he was given literally a college campus, but in order to get it, he had to write his 5-year plan. And he refused to write the 5-year plan because he said, what I do is what God tells me to do. So I believe we have to be proactive and reactive at the same time. We have to decide what's really important to us and then be willing to be reactive. Like, I don't write, I've heard people, and there are many people who are successful. It's like, oh, if you want to do something, make an appointment with yourself. That does not work for me. And I found at the end of teaching school for 1 year, the reason I hated it was because I hated knowing what I was going to do every hour of the day for 9 months. For me, I want a smorgasbord. So when I get up in the morning, I have a list of to-dos that are several things, and I might pick the one, but we all go back to systems again. So you want to be proactive in a way that works for you. So we're down to the question of, number one, what do you want to do? What is important to you to do? And then what will you do to get there?
Right. All right. I like that. I like that as a conceptual thing that people look at right now. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of information today. I want to thank both of you for joining us. It's good material. And I just want to remind people, a lot of good ideas today. The first step is really, you need to take some action. First step, you need to take some action. Make sure you sign up for the webinar. We gave out the URL. And at first, thank you, Barbara and Andrea. Thank you for joining us. It's been really good.
Thanks for having us, David.
Thank you. Yeah,
And
we enjoyed it.
It's good stuff. I want to thank everybody for listening. And I want to wish everybody great success in all areas of your life. We'll talk to everybody soon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.